Yes, it's time to take a look at stories making the headlines in Nigerian newspapers. Joining me via Skype is Jide Ologun, lawyer and social development advocate. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning, Veronica.
All right, let's head straight to the papers now, and I begin with the Daily Trust. Police rescue 126 laborers at Kano Rice Factory. Over 300 of us were locked for nearly 3 months. How we stormed the building, Police Commissioner. Owners of company, not our members, rice processors. And we move over to the blueprint now. As police seal secretariat, even though there are updates that the secretariat, that's the APC secretariat, wasn't sealed, the defiant Gadum slates APC neck for Thursday, claims it's at Buhari's instance, it's illegal, it has faction. And we move now to the Daily Times. COVID-19, federal government presents plan on schools reopening to National Assembly, lists how education sector can move forward despite pandemic, expresses concern over Oyo government's decision to reopen schools. And on the leadership front page of the Leadership newspaper, Obaseki's governorship bid tears PDP apart. Wike pulls out of reconciliation process, says the National Working Committee members are tax collectors. It's not true. Party court clears Edo governor for primaries. Gadum can't convene APC NEC. Ajimobi-led National Working Committee warns why we sealed National Secretariat, police, litigations, conflicting others, threat to Edo, Ondo, primaries, INEC. And finally, on the front page of the national economy, President Muhammadu Buhari cautions some possible setback over ECOWAS common currency. ECO approves prioritization of Nigeria's digital economy. Let's take a look at the story on the front page of the blueprint now, talking about the crisis, so to speak, rocking the APC leading up to the primaries and the governorship election in Edo State. According to our correspondent, Jide, there seems to be tension in the political atmosphere in Edo State, with the crisis rocking both political parties, talking about litigations here and there. I wonder what you make of this new development coming from Gadum now, talking about convening the National Executive Council for Thursday.
Gandom is the factional national chairman of All Progressive Congress. And of course, he has told us that he has the consent of the president to convene the meeting. But we also know that there are other stakeholders that are rocking the boat. You talk about ETA, who was appointed by the National Working Committee, of the party to act on behalf of the Deputy National Chairman, Abiola Ajimobi, who should have taken over, but for the state of health right now. So you see the absence of conflict resolution in the ruling party. And when you talk about conflict resolution, which could have prevented coming to the state party is right now, there are about 6 steps that should have been taken. You clarify what the disagreement is all about. You establish a common goal for the stakeholders. So the agenda of the party that prevailed over the personal interest of the stakeholders. And you discuss ways to meet the common goal. Then you determine the barriers to the common goal, agree on the best way to resolve the conflict, and of course, you acknowledge the agreed constitution. But we know that several times the stakeholders met at the point even when the leader of the party, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, the president of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, but they could not resolve, and now things are falling apart. But I would recommend to APC what we call the growth mindset. It refers to a theory that was developed by Dr. Arukwe. It revolves around belief that improve intelligence, ability, and performance. So there's what we call political intelligence, which have been brought here on the entire democracy. Because Michael Jordan said talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence wins champions. So, and see right now, that this forward as
So how much of a threat does this pose to? If I may interrupt your line of thoughts, Mr. Logun, can you hear me?
Stakeholders.
If I may interrupt your line of thoughts, how much of a threat does all of this pose to the elections come September the 19th? Because there was a little protest some days ago at the Secretariat, and those people were calling for the sack of the National Working Committee. Because they have lost about 7 governors, according to them. That's the youth wing of the APC that led the protest. I wonder how much of a threat you see this posing leading up to the elections in Edo State.
This is left to the people, really. You know, democracy is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So whoever emerges, and right now APC has a candidate, even though that is still being challenged, in the person of Pastor Ize Iyamu. But you bring us to what is called a democratic ideal. You talk about the values of democracy that refers to personal qualities or standards of government behavior that are essential for the continuation of the democratic policy. So it's left to the people to decide who will deliver on good governance. You see, we should not shy away from realizing that politicking will only help us to put a structure in place that will drive the governance process. And the question we should be asking right now in Nigeria is that what have we benefited from over 20 years of consistent democracy? So if governance matters, then the people will decide. So whether APC will win Edo State or PDP in the next election is left to the people to decide. But that is in an ideal situation where vote really count. But I can, reflect the picture I have that so far so good have not benefited what we should have benefited from democracy in Nigeria. And it's a matter of serious concern. And that is why you see people jumping vote. You see a candidate that was painted black becoming a saint just to drive the personal and perhaps partisan interest of politicians. So we look forward to a season where real leader, transformational leader.
Edo 2020, court refuses to stop Governor Obaseki from contesting under PDP. Wike quits Edo PDP Reconciliation Party as controversy trails police presence at APC Secretariat. And to the front page of the Daily Trust, the police rescue 126 laborers at Kanu Rice Factory. Over 300 of us were locked for nearly 3 months. How we stormed the building, police commissioner. Owners of company, not our members, rice processors. And then we move to the front page of the Blueprint now. As police seal Secretariat, Defiant Giadom slates APC neck for Thursday, claims it's at Buhari's instance. It's illegal, Eta's faction. And to the front page of the Daily Times now, COVID-19, federal government presents plan on schools reopening to National Assembly, lists how education sector can move forward despite pandemic, expresses concern over Oyo government's decision to reopen schools. And then we'll move to the front page of the Leadership newspaper now. Obaseki's governorship bid tears PDP apart. Wike pulls out of reconciliation process, says National Working Committee members are tax collectors. It's not true. Party court clears at the governor for primaries. Giadom can't convene APC NEC. Ajimobi-led National Working Committee once. Why we sealed National Secretariat Police litigations, conflicting orders, threat to Edo Ondo primaries, INEC. And finally, on the front page of the National Economy, President Muhammadu Buhari cautions on possible setback over ECOWAS common currency ECO, approves prioritization of Nigeria's digital economy. Right now, we look at the story on the front page of the Daily Times, talking about the federal government's presenting plan on reopening schools. Although details of the plans were not made public, there are concerns with the reopening of schools at this point. I wonder if you are one of those who believe that schools perhaps should reopen at this time, because what the Minister of State for Education is saying is that children are asymptomatic, and so it is not clear, there are no details, if they can actually spread the virus.
I want to start by recalling that the first confirmed case of COVID-19 in Nigeria was announced, I think, around 27th of February 2020. And as of today, we have a confirmed peak of about 21,371, about 7,338 discharged, and about 533 deaths. And if we look at that and consider the vulnerability of children who are in the academic line, then we must be very prepared before reopening our schools. And it's not just about opening schools, but how we will be able to ensure that we keep these children safe and their teachers also and stakeholders, and prevent a serious pandemic that we are even yet to experience in Nigeria. But having said that, I think we touch generally on our mindset and attitude to education. If you look at countries like China, even in the midst of the pandemic, they had to migrate their education system online, and they had enough facility and infrastructure and education architecture to back that up. But even from the presentation to the National Assembly, the government also has identified that if you talk about the private schools, some parents may be able to afford the online engagement and things like that. Because if you talk about education, we have about three main types of education. You have the formal, that involves schools and institutions. You have the informal, and you have non-formal. And right now, it's like we are collapsing them. Even parents who have their children in private schools and can afford to migrate them on online engagement. What about the economic backup for the data, for the facilities that are involved? What about electricity and other things that are involved? So I will expect that the government should seize this opportunity to enhance the quality and the capabilities of our education sector. Having said that, it's based on how we see education. But if I can echo Benjamin Franklin said, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. So if we are going to come out of COVID-19 and link up with the future of a stronger nation, we must invest everything in education. If you ask me, we've done enough between the outbreak of COVID-19 and now that we are talking about reopening, I will say no.
Let me interrupt your line of thought at this point. There are concerns that, especially with the number of out-of-school children, so many children would be cut off because not all children are in private schools, and some of the public schools do not have the structures in place for online schooling, and like you have rightly mentioned, issues of electricity and all of that. If you see, some countries have had to, say that schools are not reopening until perhaps the end of the year or until next year, perhaps. So do you think that perhaps state governments now should begin to take up this responsibility to ensure that education is brought closer to the children, whichever means possible at this point?
Absolutely. If you consider the statement of Malcolm X, he said that education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. I just mentioned the case of China. I doubt if China knew the pandemic was going to be that serious. but they already had a sound education system in place. The same can be said about South Korea. So even while managing the health crisis, they were able not to submerge the education of the students in the mud or in the ocean. And that is what we are saying now. And I mean, you just mentioned it brilliantly. We must pay due attention to education at the federal level, at the state level, at the local government level, because if you don't educate the young ones, the future is endangered, and we can see where the country is now. And talking about the states taking responsibility, one of the concerns of the PTF also now is that Oyo State is planning to reopen schools, and there is the fear of the pandemic spreading further. I know that in Cross River State also, Governor Ayade was going to reopen schools, but he had to listen to the medical practitioners and stakeholders who advised against it. So as a nation, obviously, we do not have the capacity to manage this crisis and ensure that our education sector is not negatively affected, and it's not the best. So whether at the federal level, state level, local government level, even at the parental level also, we must ensure that we don't lose excessively in the education sector. If you talk about industrialization and developed countries, education has a major role to play, and we must just bridge that gap. And that also talks about our prioritizing our lines of expenditure, because if you ask me how much we have spent during this COVID-19 crisis and how much of this went into ensuring that students are back in school, that we have the electricity, that we have the scientific backup to even enhance, because even when we resume now, I expect that the education system will be more technologically driven than the analog system.
All right.
We have to do in catching up with the civilization.
All right, Jide Olungu, thank you so much for speaking with us.
We come on stage. So the people of Edo State will decide they are allowed